you're here, and your wife was on the flight, right? So, um, right, we were just talking about closure or the lack of it, right? And but what sort of what memories of your wife bring comfort? Are there any things that you do from time to time, periodically? Anything that you would like to share?
Interesting. I have not set up a gallery of memories, right? And so I don't have a scrapbook. Let's put it that way, right? But what I do have are moments when I recount something, or something that I see around me, a conversation with somebody, or I'm rummaging through the house and I find something and it brings back some recollections of a time that we may have had some part to play in that little piece lying in the house. So that's largely been how it has panned out for me. Um, I I do think there are a few things about her that stand out even today, very loud and clear. For instance, I recall her to be a very intense person, intense, full of life, and you know, uh, uh, many things that had a very strong Gandhian kind of a outlook to things. For example, she was not vehemently, but she was very forcefully nonviolent. You know, she always felt that the better argument should win, not your decibel level or just the power that you wield. Um, she was very strongly environmentally wise about what we were doing to the planet, and in her own ways, the way that we ran the house, it bore the imprint of her environmental consciousness from little small things. And so if I look around issues of gender, for instance, they were very, very close and dear to her. The whole our relationship started on the platform of an equal relationship, and I've had to learn what this means. I perhaps grew up in a fairly sheltered. I was a mama's boy, perhaps at some point in time, and I had to learn what equality in a marital relationship means, and that is not arithmetic at the end of the day. That's something very different. So, so we went through a tally of chores that we would, total up and say who's doing more or less and so on. And then it kind of morphed into something else and moved to a place of respect, regard, and concern for what each of us were doing and bringing to the home. So there are many, many things about her which were very inspiring in a way. It continues to find some resonance in the sort of things that I do and I try and work with. Yeah, so lots of things. She had a great sense of humor, and in any gathering, one would hear her peals of laughter very, very distinctly. So yeah, so she had a great zest for life.
And in your book, you had written about the episode where a foreign couple, comes and stays in your home for a couple of nights, I believe, right? And for me, I saw it as a very lighthearted take on, her personality. And I'm going to ask folks to actually go and read it. And I think your writing will do justice to that instead of me summing it up here. Thanks for sharing that. And now, I believe 5 Indian families lost their dear ones, right? And then, of course, like you said, people from 14 different countries. And so people all over the world, the majority were, of course, Chinese nationals. And in your book, you've also written about how you were in constant communication with the other folks, and then the challenges with communication itself because of the language barriers. Um, so over the years, how has that relationship evolved? Are you still in touch with folks?
Okay. Okay. There were three families with and five Indians on the flight. So I was affected. There's another gentleman, roughly about the same age as me. He lost his wife. And a third family where the man lost his parents and a brother. So there were five Indians, but from three families. But overall, there were, I think, people from about 14 countries who were on the flight. I got wise to this need to collaborate with other families and to engage and to connect and to rally around a little late, almost a couple of months after the plane disappeared. And I'd struggled initially to get the attention of the Malaysian government, because at that time, because of the preponderance of the Chinese families, and the 150 plus families were affected, a lot of the attention was focused around them. And so I think and given the fact that my own government was missing from the whole action, I was a little lost and I didn't know what to do. And so it became important to somehow figure how to reach across to other families and to know how are they coping and what are they doing and what is that they are hearing, and so already there was a collective that had come together, some in Beijing, some in Malaysia. And I think slowly the families kind of got in touch and we sort of formed an association, a family association of passengers. It's been a difficult experience, actually, because the fact of the matter is that, we're dealing with different nationalities, different cultures, different time zones, different orientations. For example, just I might be more comfortable saying my wife passed away. Other cultures may have an issue with being very open about it. Culturally, for them, no chapter is closed till there is evidence, right? So we're dealing not just with people, but actually people from very different cultures as well. And so it's been quite an experience to find a platform, to create a platform where we could connect, we could engage, we could share, we could harmonize our views around, the next steps vis-a-vis the government of Malaysia, and vis-a-vis, our own respective governments. So, on issues of funding, the search, on issues of, pushing the Malaysian government on issues of compensation, on, contracting with a search firm, on a number of issues. And it's also a fact that families were trying to move on as well, because, there had to be some, call it the new normal, but everybody was in search of some normal in their own lives. And at different times, getting back to the issues of search and investigation, it was a kind of a difficult reminder, unfortunate reminder of the fact that somebody was missing in their lives. Right? And so people's interest and involvement would kind of wax and wane. And, it also meant newer faces and newer voices would kind of come to the fore. But I think a lot needs to be done in how we organize and how we represent, how we engage with the press, the media. There are many learnings there, I think. So let's see how it goes from here. But it's not been easy. Sometimes because English often ends up becoming the language of communication for a large part of the world. People who could communicate in English became, the point of contact quite often, to engage, to speak, and to articulate on behalf of the families and so on. So, so one might argue that some ended up bearing a disproportionate part of the responsibility. So all kinds of things happen. I think when 100+ families sort of decide to put their hearts and minds together.
Yeah, and that's the sad part, right? I mean, like so many families, but no answers yet. And it's and it's been, like I said, over 10 years. I don't think anyone can imagine what folks go through. It's just, but now, what is it that you wish other people are mindful of? When folks hear about these things. So I'll give you an example. I mean, all the recent news about Boeing, right? It has reached a point where people make fun of, or there are so many memes floating around. Yes, I've occasionally had a laugh at it, but then we lose sight of the the major incidents like this. So what do you tell people about all this? And by the way, how do you feel when you hear things about this, aircraft safety and all?
Okay. I read them with interest. I have, through my interactions with safety experts and others connected with the industry, I'm reasonably aware that findings of most such investigations are a very carefully calibrated, compromise between competing interests. Okay, because there are dollars involved, there's liability involved, there are investments involved. Okay, and there are reputations involved. So I understand that and I see that, and so I know that if something comes out into the open, for example, about Boeing, things must be quite bad. It worries me, it bothers me, and it's how far would we kind of look the other way when commercial interests override issues of safety, issues of design excellence, of solidity in manufacturing, and things that people of science, should draw a line and never compromise. So it bothers me. That's surely something that concerns me, and I do share once in a while. I've given up at least a part of me, which till some years ago, I would try to go into great lengths to try and understand the technical issues involved, either about MH370 or about Boeing or about aviation itself. And I realized that, I'm not a technologist, and I don't need to become one to make sense of what are largely issues of human interactions, goals, human endeavor. Okay, and I think some things should be left to the scientists and the technologist community. And, I should never pretend that I can, read up and just think I can find my way to ask some intelligent question. That's really. So I'm not with the details of what's going right or wrong from a technical standpoint, but I do understand management. I do understand behavior. I do understand what makes sense from a societal perspective. And so largely my response comes from there. But I do believe, and I may not be very popular for saying this, I think at some stage we need to be able to laugh at ourselves. Loss or no loss. I think part of healing, part of growing, part of moving on is also to give that space for oneself to have a good laugh, and not stay too touchy, after a point, and what I think it does is that it releases others as well. I've experienced this and I could be wrong. Sometimes I've encountered people who, knowing the circumstances of my life, end up kind of conditioning how they engage with me in a certain way, which is completely unnecessary. But I have moved on. And so to imagine, so they perhaps imagine that, they need to tiptoe around a few things, a few facts, a few events, and, lest they, sort of hurt me or, trigger something in me or so on. And so it sort of constrains the space. I'm saying, if you have to move on, if you have to grow, and if you have to accept certain realities of existence, I think we need to be able to have a good laugh. Sometimes at ourselves. For example, I'm quite happy to have a good, hearty laugh at how I have dealt with the last 10 years. For instance, I initially thought I was a Superman, perhaps, thinking I was a very strong guy, who could deal, say, come on, deal whatever you have to deal with me, and and I can live with it all. The fact of the matter is I was crumbling. And when I thought I should have taken help, including counseling help, I thought I could do it all myself, which is stupid. So I think some humility, some humor, some willingness to sort of let bygones be bygones, I think are all part and parcel of healing and moving on. And the more we're able to do that, I think we will feel more liberated, and I think it will free up others as well and expand the space that we can experience with each other. For example, in our own conversation, I think you are very, very concerned about what we could speak about or what we could not speak about. I mean, I'm a very here and now example, right? And I think I told you, I'm happy to speak about anything. Trust me, I'm not going to be offended unless it's very lowbrow. And we'll see, right? So I stand by this.
Now, you mentioned counseling, not to get too private, but did you try counseling? You did.
Well, I heard that other families had been offered access to counseling services, okay, through the network, I gathered. In my pettiness, I think at that time, I said, hey, how come nobody's asked me? How come I'm not aware of this? So I wrote to the airlines and sought that support. And they were gracious enough to extend that. I know it's not very common to be kind to the airline. Uh, we're often used to characterizing them as the villain.
Mm.
But they were ready enough to offer. I didn't pick it up. As I said, I thought I was managing quite well. I thought I was doing quite well. I thought I was being fairly functional in the midst of uncertainties. And I thought I was being a reasonably decent support to my family. And I thought I could just get by with the um, love and affection that I had from the family. It's much later that I realized that maybe I could have and perhaps should have reached out for some counseling assistance.
And I'll tell you why I asked that, because even today in India, counseling or psychotherapy, they seem to be taboo topics. So that's why I asked. And thanks for sharing what you just said.
No,
So-
it's a good point
Please.
making.
Mm.
I suspect I held a similar prejudice
Mm.
and perhaps disdain for those services at that time. And as I said, I woke up to it to know what it can offer much later.
So as we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you something that hit me very powerfully when I read your book. It's about closure. And you said in your book, you've written that you actually picked it from, someone else. You've actually attributed it to the author. That closure is not about letting go of past, but it's letting go of the future you're not to have. Can you talk about that? When did you come across that? And because for me, that was a completely different way of looking at things. Can you expand on that?
It's very interesting that you bring it up. It had escaped from my memory all these months, all these years since I wrote.
Mm.
And now that you bring it back to the conversation, I realize how significant it is. See, I think when you lose somebody, it's not just about what you had with that person. That's certainly one part of it, but it's not all. I think it has also to do with what are the dreams and hopes and plans that you have either constructed or held in conversation, okay, that extends into the future. Now, I think part of closure, I suspect, has to acknowledge what belongs to memory, okay, and in a way that is never going to become real and a live thing. Memory is a dead artifact, tangible or intangible. You cannot resurrect it.
Mm.
That's what I mean, right? But equally, I think closure does then involve also saying goodbye to what one had envisaged collectively as a future.
Mm.
And then to start afresh and say, what is it that I would like to build anew on the back of my own strengths, on the back of my own resilience, on the back of, whatever else I've discovered about myself in coping and in dealing with loss. So in that sense, I think, there are people who, for example, do something in the memory of somebody. in the future, right? Which still is about invoking memory, right? It is not about the future. I don't know if this helps, but this is how I internalize the meaning of this particular saying that I came across. Certainly not my
Right.
articulation, but it appealed to me hugely at that time.
Mhm.
I think it helped me to make departures. It helped me to, not just sit on my ass and do nothing.
Mhm. So, yeah, I mean, Mrs. Chandrika Narendran, is that how uh, she used to go by?
No, no. She was Chandrika Sharma.
Okay.
She retained her name, and that's what we knew it to be at all times,
Mm.
right? And she was happiest keeping her name, and I was more than happy. So she was Chandrika Sharma.
So, like Mrs. Chandrika Sharma, so many people lost their lives, and the incident affected so many families. But the way you have traveled, the past 10 years, your resilience reminds us that love transcends time, and hope endures even in the darkest of skies. And I do sincerely wish and hope that they locate the aircraft, in your lifetime. There is definitely a possibility of that happening. So let's hope for that. And but for today, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing, uh, your journey, which is not always easy. But thank you so much for taking the time and doing it.
Thank you very much. You've been a patient listener, and your questions have both kindled memory and invited me to explore new avenues, or to rethink stuff that I had already thought I had settled. So it is very useful. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.